So welcome. The bit.ly for the slide deck is there. You're going to want the slide deck. Whether you follow along, slide by slide during the presentation is that's up to you, but there are a lot of embedded links in it. So you will want it as a resource, if nothing else. My name is Andrew Shaver. Just to remind you, I am the instruction and technology coach at Ingham Intermediate School District. I'm also the director of REMC 13 and one of the co-conspirators of 517 Ed Tech. And I will allow the rest of the team to do their own introductions.
Hi, my name is Phil Booth. I am an assistive technology consultant for Ingham ISD, and these 517 Ed Tech people let me hang out with them.
We enjoy having you hang out with us, Phil. It's great. And I serve in a similar role to Phil, only I'm out in Eaton County as the assistive and instructional technology coach and part of 517 Ed Tech, along with Allison and Andrew.
And I'm Allison Rogers, the instructional technology specialist at Clinton County Reset and co-conspirator of 517 Ed Tech, Andrew and Christy.
So in some of my videos, particularly our digital instruction network, I refer to Christy accurately as the legendary Christy Lobdell, and I refer to Allison accurately as Allison the Great. But we don't have a moniker for Phil yet, so we are taking suggestions. Feel free if you can come up with something clever and interesting, and it doesn't have to be accurate, although we'd like it to be. For Phil, feel free to send an email with a suggestion, and then session 3, we may, if we add your moniker, if you're the winner, then maybe there'll be a special 517 Ed Tech prize, since we're in the mood to give so much stuff away. So speaking of taking your feedback, we did that survey, and thank you for those of you who filled that out. We got about half, which is pretty good for a survey in the spring. So we are going to be continuing to refer back to that. We pulled some very interesting quotes, and you'll see those come up throughout the rest of the session. Just to give you a sense of who we are. Hang on a second. Yep, that's still me. Sorry, making sure those are my slides. I just talked. We are 517 Ed Tech and REMC 13 covers all of Clinton, Eaton, and Ingham counties. If you would like more information about 517 Ed Tech or REMC 13, those images are clickable, and those will take you to those home pages where you can get more information. And of course, if after you look at all that, you still have questions, feel free to reach out and we'll tell you all about it. So session 1 was on January 31st. That recording does exist. If you want to review the mindset conversation that we had, we are going to continue to build on that today. So we want to, so if it feels like what we're saying isn't all that familiar, or, it's been a long time since late January, and it has, lots happened since then, that video is there for you to review. Our third session is coming up May 2nd, and that's kind of a long ways out. And the reason for that is we are going to be talking about what we're going to ask you to try and mess with between now and then.
All right, so just really quickly, just like in session 1, normal Zoom norms. So just mute yourself unless you're speaking, throw your questions and comments in the chat. I was getting very distracted by some of your really awesome suggestions for Phil's name, so keep up the good work. Thank you for that. And we'll deal with all the sign-in stuff at break. Then I'm going to jump right into housekeeping. So as Andrew mentioned, each session is going to be recorded, and then we'll post it in the Google group. But we really want to stress the importance of attending live, especially for session 3, because it's going to be extremely participant driven. Again, you can earn 6 sketches for attending all 3 sessions and filling out all 3 sign-in forms. And again, we'll share that form on the break. The box of resources and the copy of your book, they have now been delivered to you, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. And then lastly, the Google Group network. At this point, if you are here, that means that you are part of our Educator's Workbench series. So you should be receiving emails from the Google group. So if that's not the case, be sure to connect with us during the break or at the end of the session.
And here's the agenda for us for 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and it's really packed. We've got a lot of stuff on here, so it's real important that you download this slide deck from the link that's on the slide and other slides, and then just go to file and make a copy for yourself, and then you'll have all these resources, because we are going to fly through these slides. And but like when we started at 4, and then we're going to take a look at tools in your workbench, and then at 4:30 we're going to start on themes and strategies, and we'll have a break. We'll continue with the themes and strategies, and then 10 minutes before 6 we're going to start talking about the next steps and the application to the tools that you received in the bag. So I just wanted to talk about just kind of stepping back to the first session, and in January 3rd, Andrew had mentioned, is that we were taking a look at 4 main inclusive mindset pieces to our book. And hopefully you're able to take a look at the book and see how it was structured in the way, and especially in the first part where, saying, don't forget to read this section. One of the pieces was just the function first. We have to remember, we're here because we are tools people. We like technology. We want to try to learn and get all these tools to work in our classroom, but we have to remember that strategies and function of technology is the most important piece to all of this. And then we're taking a look at learn something new every day. Educators model learning, and for learners, we need to be able to learn as we're going as a process and trying to learn every day. And then the authentic inclusion. And see, I've been doing that ever since we've started this training, as I call authentic inclusion, authentic instruction. And every student needs to be motivated to be actively engaged. And then design over accommodations. If you're ever been part of an IEP and you're within that team, and the team comes up with 12, 15, almost 20 accommodations, you have to pause for a second and think, are we having an environment for this kid to function in a good way? And that's when we talk about this in the book, is everyone, we have everything, we're doing this for everyone in mind. You don't need to just provide accommodations to anyone when you know that you have everybody in mind. So the next slide is the book that you received, and if you click onto the book, that's a link to what we're doing for the website of the book. And if you want to dive in even more deeper into what's going on with what we're trying to do with these sessions, it's a great way of doing that. So one of the things, there's a few things in the book that's really cool, is you learn more about the authors. There's a section for events and conferences that they're presenting at and talking about the book. There also is, they talk about their follow on Twitter and Facebook, and there is a forum for open sharing. So they have a Google Doc there, and you can fill out the Google Doc on some of the things that you have tried from the book. And you can get on their mailing list, and they'll be sending you things on a regular basis. Really cool.
So another section or part of the book that you may have noticed when you're scrolling through the intro is how they grouped the 365 strategies, and how they chose to group them was by purpose. So you'll see on each page, there is at least one of these icons. Many of the strategies have more than one of these icons. So if you are looking for a specific strategy that has to do with researching, you can search by that little research icon, and that's totally okay. That's how the authors chose to group it, and that is one way to use this book. As we were going through this book, we were kind of taking a different approach and kind of thinking about our classrooms and barriers that we might be facing in our classrooms. So as we are trying to reach all of our learners and create a more inclusive learning environment, what is preventing us from getting there? So we kind of broke it down, and you guys saw these terms when we sent out that feedback form a couple of weeks ago. These were some that we pulled out, and we were curious to know if these were also themes that you guys are kind of recognizing as possible entry points for your lesson design and your classroom space design. And we got some pretty positive feedback across most of these areas, but what we really noticed, and I know Andrew's going to talk about this a little bit more, but we noticed that really all of you, 100% of you, wanted to explore more opportunities and strategies to increase that active engagement piece in your classroom. We also noticed that none of you, 0% of you, indicated that mistake tolerance was something that you wanted to learn more about or increase awareness of in your classroom. So we're taking that, and we kind of noticed that those are kind of interwoven into all of these 4 themes that we're going to cover today. And it'll be interesting to see your take on that, but I'm excited to dig into these. So the 4 themes we're going to chat about are as follows. We're going to talk about alternative lesson design. We are going to talk about adding audio and video for not only just your student or learner benefit, but for your benefit as an educator as well. We're going to talk about alternatives to writing with special guest DJ, Doctor Management. A little take on doc management with Allison. She's not the DJ, but who knows? And then we're going to talk about DIY and classroom space design. Phil mentioned this, but you guys have that bag with you. You might not have it with you in your classroom right now, but you were given that bag of stuff, the tools. And that's kind of like the coolest part about all of this and this whole series that we're doing. But we found this quote in the book. Allison found this quote in the book, and we wanted to remind you guys as well that it's really about the function piece. It's about the learning that's occurring in your environment. And these tools will help us get there, but they really aren't the main focus of what we're going to be talking about. However, they will be the focus of the next 10 or so minutes, and Allison describes what's in your workbench.
All right, so digging into probably what was most exciting about signing up for this initial Educator's Workbench is all the free tools and swag that was in your deliveries last week and this past week. So I'm just going to go through this list of items that should have been delivered to you. And basically, if anything in this list you did not find in your bag, we just wanted to point out that these were manually packed. So if you happen to be missing in something, that's okay. We can remedy that. But just shoot us an email, let us know, and we'll get it to you as soon as we can. And before I forget, in this list, the only thing that is late in transit is the headset. So no one will have a headset right now in their box of stuff. So right now you should have, at this point, your Inclusive Learning 365 book, whether it's an ebook or a hard copy is based on your specifications. You should also have just some basics like Post-it notes, index cards, highlighters, some other REMC swag, and then the lamination pockets. And then the more techie stuff, you're going to have the digital voice recorder, the graphics tablet, the webcam with the tripod, and the gooseneck tablet that can be used as a phone stand. And most importantly, everyone should have received a little pie because it is Pie Day. Our resident math teacher, Andrew, made sure that he bought them in bulk. And so if you want to enjoy your pie, if you haven't already, feel free to do so at this time throughout the session. So I'm going to just go through really briefly a few things. Andrew, will you go back to the first slide? So slides 13 through 20 are just a reference. They're just a reference for you to, check out some of the manuals, help docs, videos, just tips in general for all of the features of those, especially the techie tools. But this session is, we're jam-packed with lots of stuff. And so if we went down the rabbit hole of how-tos, we wouldn't even get to any of the strategies. So what we decided to do is we're going to sort of list everything, and then we're going to have what we're calling our tool time. So we're going to have 3 separate sessions via Zoom where you can join us, and we're going to talk about the different tools. So the first one is April 11th, 4 to 4:30. That's going to be on graphics tablet. April 14th will be 4 to 4:30 for the voice recorder, and April 18th, 4 to 4:30 for the webcam. So we will record these sessions. So if for some reason you can't attend, and we'll push those out to the Google group. But we just wanted to make sure that you aren't given all this stuff and then we're like, okay, good luck, figure it out on your own. We realize that you'll want some support, and so that's how we decided to approach it. And we just also want to acknowledge our sponsors of basically how we were able to get all of the stuff in your bag. 517 EdTech, lots of swag, lots of REMC Save purchases, lots of Discovery Ed swag, as well as REMC. So thank you to those sponsors. And then, as I mentioned, slides 15 through 20 are just full of information for the various tools, the digital voice recorder. If you see a link, it's typically either a manual or a help document or a video. Same thing for the graphics tablet, talks about compatibility, different features, again, user manuals. And I tried to find as best tutorial videos as I could, many of which I kept coming across like they were promotional, or they were, opening the box and let's, see what we think of this. So I tried to find the actual how-to videos as much as we can, but we will give you a better how-to during those tool time Zooms. And then of course the gooseneck. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to dig into kind of our beginnings of the theme 1 and our different strategies.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's something we had to kind of choose how we were going to organize this time, and going through how-tos can be very time consuming. So that's why we made that decision that way. So one of the things that is a great thing about a book like ours is that there's 365 unique strategies for you to consider and try. The problem with that is that there's 365 unique strategies for you to try, which is a whole lot. And there's no reason to believe that you need 365 new strategies for your classroom. Most of you are probably 10 good ones away from your class being an A+, brag about it, Hall of Fame class, right? So the question is kind of like, how do you find the right 10? And what is it you're trying to do? So when we were going through these, and if you have not flipped or scrolled through your book yet, you'll notice that all of the strategies are in the back. So that intro section, and they've got it organized so that like if you're in the hard copy, the white pages along the edge are your intro, and then the gray pages are where the strategies begin. And the pages, they're just one per page. The strategies are just one per page. So all of those strategies in there, we had to kind of think about how we were going to organize them. And so the first thing we want to talk about today is alternate lesson design. Okay, but there's 2 pieces to that. Okay, as we were saying before, as Christy was saying, the idea of active engagement is quite tightly linked together with the idea of mistake tolerance. And we thought it was pretty interesting how almost all of you, if not all of you, who responded to the survey wanted to talk about active engagement. And it wasn't until the very last responder that somebody finally clicked yes on mistake tolerance. Okay, which is an interesting thing. It could be that maybe you wouldn't interpret that phrase the same way we did or something like that, but it's very interesting. But if you're gonna increase engagement, you're gonna increase it in the mistakey part of the learning. You're not gonna increase engagement in the mastery part very often. If there's gonna be places where the students are doing more engaging, it's probably gonna be doing more engaging during the learning process, which is where a lot of the mistakes happen. Okay, so we saw those two things as fitting together neatly. Okay, so it'll be interesting to see if we can make that case, and maybe we're wrong. Feel free to push us back in the chat. That's okay with us. So as we go through this, though, we're not under any impression that there's anything in this book that the expertise of the collective group doesn't already contain. So you're going to see this little icon, this little blue Google Docs icon in the top corner of the slides that we talk about the strategies. Okay, and what that's there for is for you, if you know of a strategy that's been really effective for you at that end that we're talking about, you can go and say, here's what I do, and it has never failed. It works perfectly every time I do it. Put that in there, because this is not just about saying, hey, look at how good the people in the book are. We are going to share with each other as well. And that's actually what the end part of this session and all the intervening time between session 2 and session 3 is going to be dedicated to. Okay, so let's get started talking about alternative lesson design. And in order to have this conversation, we want to talk about what we're setting up an alternative to, right? So the question of alternative, right? If you're going to say that we need alternative or alternate or something, that's creating an opposition of some sort, right? It's different than something else. So we're going to take a look at that. So one of the quotes that we got from the survey in the free write was, one of my goals I am hoping to make an improvement in is multiple forms of representation in my classes. For my self-teaching secondary social studies, I find that students do well if I can show multiple forms and examples of things to help them understand a concept or idea. Okay. Now I like that because it's a very specific aim. Okay. That's where that particular responder, that's the aim they have for where the alternatives are going to be built into. So let's take a look at what a lesson looks like. Okay, now obviously we've all taught. Okay, so I'm sure this is all going to be reviewed, but I want to make sure and get us on the same page. So in general, there is an introductory thing, and then there's some teaching and learning time, and then we give some sort of an assessment, right? That's a lesson, right? But of course, we know that that's not really, there's a lot more to it than that, right? So we may have to go through some sort of a prerequisite review, but we're not sure if we're going to do that. That's an if necessary. So we collect an artifact of some kind first, right? We're going to collect some sort of a evidence of what the students know to see if we need to do a prerequisite review or not. If we don't, then we move on to the teaching and learning time. But teaching and learning time, that's a pretty, it's a little more complex than that, because generally speaking, there's some brand new content learning time, which is ordinarily high engagement direct instruction of some kind. And then there's independent-ish guided practice time, right? That's where the exploration comes from. That's deeper learning time once the students have gotten through the introductory material. Okay, now the question of how do we know if they're ready for the deeper learning time? Well, that might need a reteach, and we pull another artifact. Okay, that's how we find that. We look at more evidence, and that's where that comes from. Okay, and then we collect a final artifact at the end as evidence of whether or not they've hit the target that we've set for them. or the target that they've set for themselves. Okay, now generally speaking, we're used to referring to these artifacts as assessments. Okay, that's ordinarily the language that we've used. We're choosing to use the word artifacts just because sometimes if you change the wording a little bit, it can spark a new idea. So really what we're talking about when we talk about an assessment is collecting some evidence of what the students know. They're just leaving an artifact of their learning behind for us to look at. This is one target for alternatives. This is one target for alternatives. We could collect a wide variety of different types of artifacts. That's one place where just simply saying, okay, ordinarily I'd give a small quiz at the end of this day to see what they do. Well, you don't have to. You don't have to give a quiz. You could give a quiz. You could also collect other kinds of artifacts, right? So the question of what kind of artifacts do you usually collect, if that's a fairly narrow band for you, which it may or may not be, but if it is, now you've got a target, a potential target for alternatives. Okay. The other piece to look at is the learning time. And this is where our responder that we quoted was coming from, right? The artifacts are sort of like what you collect. The learning times are sort of like what you're building for the students as in terms of, or the learners as far as experience goes, right? So these are another place where alternatives, we can talk about alternatives, right? We can change the experience the students are having for how they're learning a new topic, the types of activities we're asking them to do, the types of engagement that we're asking them to have, whether it's them speaking out in front of the whole group, whether it's them writing, whether it's them collecting their thoughts on a video, whether it's them sharing in a small group, whether it's them writing something down, either physically with a pencil or typing it on a screen or finding a picture or something like that, right? So that's another question for you to ask yourself as we explore this. What types of doing do your learners usually do? How are they engaged during the learning time? When you're asking them to learn something new, what types of things are they normally doing? So this is where we break into the book. Okay, so some of these, and there's lots of those in here, the active engagement piece, whether it's engaged, focused on what type of artifact it's leaving behind, or what type of doing you're asking the students to do, which those two things are pretty well connected. There's just all sorts of different ideas for you to flip through or scroll through, depending on what type of book you got. And so I've chosen a couple just to talk a little bit about what they look like. So if you haven't really dug into this, this is what you're going to find there. So like, for example, strategy 120, okay? Building background knowledge by reading an article a day. Okay, so the theory behind this basically is that when students know more stuff, just in general, they're more curious about things because it's easier for them to make connections to new learning. Okay, now that's a gross overgeneralization, of course, but in general, this strategy says, okay, as a warm-up to maybe every other day or something like that, maybe we wouldn't do it every day, but you have the students explore a new thing connected to your content or not, okay? Just for the sake of having them learn a new thing. And there's lots of different ways that we could do this, okay? The quote from the book is there as to why you may want to try this. The tools in your toolbox would be potentially a voice recorder. If you are wanting to have a short conversation on a new idea, you could record that and then post the audio later for students who weren't there. And then the webcam, possibly, if you are talking through an artifact. So maybe the artifact, talking through a new article a day type thing. And there's a picture or something where you want to make sure and focus on the same thing. But here are some resources that you'll see there on the screen too, where you can do article a day type stuff. Wonderopolis is a great resource. Mystery Dog is another great resource. The Smithsonian Tween Tribune is a great resource. ReadWorks Article a Day is a great resource. Like, these are things that are free to access. They're easy to navigate, at least as far as I can tell. Okay. And these are things where you're just changing the experience a little bit. You're giving the students something new to engage. And some of those are video sites, some of those are reading sites, some of them are both, so that you give students a chance to explore in a way that makes the most sense to them. Or that, you know, because in this case, it's exploring the content that's more important than any mode of exploring the content. You just want them learning a new thing for the 5 minutes while you're taking attendance or whatever. So there's an example of a strategy, an active engagement strategy. And then and then obviously, and maybe it's not obvious, so I'll stop saying obviously, because that's a transition word that I'm wasting. But if you get the students actively engaged in a learning activity, that builds a momentum that now you can transition that into content for your class, because there's a momentum, a positive forward momentum for the class. Another strategy is strategy 86, checking for understanding with memes. So this is an alternate form of artifact. But I don't know if you're familiar with memes. They're they're on social media all the time. They're like the picture with the little bits of words on them, and they're usually worded cleverly. What's interesting about the meme as a genre is how much stuff is built into such a small little space. Okay, so I'm going to show you one. Okay, now if you're not I'm not even going to say that. Okay, if you don't understand Lord of the Rings, if you're not familiar with Lord of the Rings, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get it. And I'm not saying that that's not an inside joke. I'm not trying to like make anybody feel bad. My point is, if your student made that, you can be confident that there's a lot of understanding that student has, because there's a lot going on in that meme. And it's the same with all kinds of different kinds of memes. Okay, just how much understanding it takes to make a good meme. And so I know a teacher in one of the districts I support who always has the students choose a character from the novel they're reading and make a meme, and use one of the standard memes that they make to represent that character. And that's his way of understanding whether or not the students really make sense of that character in context. Do the students understand how that character is interacting with other characters, their personality, a little bit of their backstory? How did you choose that meme? Okay. And so if you're going to just choose the distracted boyfriend meme, is that an appropriate choice given what you know about that character in context? If you're going to choose the meme with the kid with the sweater who's got the kind of goofy grin on his face, is that an appropriate meme for the students? For that character in context. So this is one where you didn't actually need a new tool from the Discovery Ed bag to do this. You could employ this right now as long as your students have a value add of having this type of artifact added. Okay, so addtext.com and the IMG Flip meme generator are two ways that are easy and free for the students to build their own memes as far as that goes. The addtext.com, if you were to click on that, you will see a video that I made back in 2017. So if you want to go back to the long ago times and see what I looked like in 2017, that is a tech tool that has not changed all that much since 2017. So for what that's worth to you. So anyway, so that's an example of an alternate type of artifact, because you could ask the students to write an essay, but you're going to run into a lot of issues with your students getting them to write a couple of sentences. But if you give them a chance to make a meme about the character, they may engage that differently. And I'm not claiming that you need to revert all of your artifact collections to memes, or all of your all of your warm-up activities need to be article a day. The point is a tool bench, right? Educators Workbench. The more tools you have at your disposal, the more comfort level you have using them, the better ability you have then to offer those alternatives when you see the opportunity for the alternative to be a value add. Are there questions or thoughts that you have? Feel free to either unmute yourself and share those out, or you can add those to the chat.
I'm going to add something real quick here. In a classroom that I supported, memes were used as a way to work on figurative language. So if they're working on metaphors or onomatopoeia, they had to go and find an image and add the text that allowed the teacher to see that they understood what a metaphor was based on the words they used and the image that they picked. And the kids loved it. And I can very certainly say that they understood the concept of a metaphor versus a simile much better after that activity than maybe if they had a worksheet where they were matching or, writing their own on a paper. Just the engagement piece was so high. And there were for sure mistakes. The teacher was constantly going around like, that's a good image for what you're thinking, but we need to remember that a simile uses the word like or as. So let's adjust what you're saying for that. Beth, that was at the middle school level. This was a 6th grade class that I'm thinking of. Let's go through the second theme for today's session. And this is one that there was a lot of feedback on. Yeah, Beth, you're right. He might need that pie. I don't know if did you take one home, Andrew? A pie for yourself? There were some good flavors in there too as I was delivering bags. We're gonna need some feedback.
That's right. There may be a special section added just for pie.
So audio video, we talked about adding components of audio and video to benefit either ourselves as an educator or our students as learners. Here are a couple of quotes that we received from you guys when we sent out that feedback survey. Somebody wanted to learn how to record a live class session so they could post for their absent students or their at-home learners. I know, gosh, when we last met around January 31st, we were coming back from a couple of months where absences were like pretty prevalent. And I feel like within the last few weeks that has gotten better. We've had students present more often, but this occurs always where we're going to have students out for a variety of reasons, or students who are choosing to learn from home. We had another participant say that they were hoping to institute video recordings of lessons and for student feedback. So hopefully we can cover those ideas a little bit here over the next section. Again, you'll see that blue Google Docs icon in the left-hand corner of these slides, and that is for you to click on if you have an idea, a tool, a strategy that kind of supports this theme. I just had my children get home from school, but they have tasks to do. Go to your tasks. So strategy 20 is what we're going to start on here. Promoting participation using audio video recordings. So this strategy is solely focusing on the participation piece of our learners. And the book talked about how when we provide the option for audio recordings, we're going to have those students who might be hesitant to raise their hand or who might need that little extra time to process. We might just allow them that way to participate and provide their input where they otherwise maybe wouldn't. So having the option to audio record thoughts is kind of the basis for this strategy. The authors even talked about, and I know this is a very low incidence case, but where you have a student who uses an alternative augmentative communication device, where they have an iPad or something that they are using as their form of verbal output and communication, where maybe it takes them quite a long time to formulate a sentence on that. And by the time they formulate that sentence, we maybe have moved on. So if they can record that and capture that on your little audio recorder, now they have a way to share. This right-hand column is where we just list whether we feel that there are tools from your Workbench bag that you can pull in to utilize this strategy. We also tried to list at least one, if not several, non-Workbench tools. So right there, I have 4 live links for sites that provide a way to record audio. Vocaroo is one of my favorites just because of the simplicity of the site. Basically, all it is a place to record audio. And then some resources. So the first one is just a really quick Loom video that I made where I talk about using Vocaroo for students to be able to record their voice to respond or to participate. And then what it does is it just provides them with a link that they can copy and paste either onto your Google Classroom public comment section, onto their worksheet, share it in some other way as a way to provide their input. The other one was a blog post by one of our authors, Chris Bugay, and he shared ideas for how to incorporate voice recordings into your classroom. And that image I captured with the topic sentence, the 3 details, and the conclusion is one that came from that blog. So you can see, I know it's small, but you can see that there are just icons of a little speaker in each of those sections. So that was from a student who, rather than typing out those 5 sections of a paper, they chose to provide an audio recording to kind of plan out their paper, or maybe this was even the final copy. And that was the way that they chose to provide it. So it's a little bit of outside of the box thinking, but again, if you have other ways to embed this strategy, please add it to that Google Doc link that we have on this page.
Karen mentioned Cami as a tool as well, which is a great choice. Because that, in addition to the audio video, that's got a lot of great options in terms of navigating PDFs, which is PDFs are a great way to share things, as in some instances, and a kind of a tricky way to interact with things in other options. So, so Cami is a nice choice.
And there's a free version and a paid version of Cami too. So, and but the paid version, take a look at it. It's pretty reasonable. So, yeah, it's a great resource.
Flipgrid is a great choice too. And the nice thing about Flipgrid is, unless something's changed, it's free. Like it's all the way free.
Right. And then I'm going to talk about this on another slide, but Text Helps Read and Write for Google is another one that I know a lot of districts have access to, the premium version or the free version, but another way where you can embed audio notes onto Google Docs or PDFs. Yeah, these are great. And if you guys don't mind adding those to the Google Doc, that would be awesome. The next theme, or I'm sorry, the next strategy, you can see I had kind of a hard time deciding. So I put 3 strategies on this page because I felt like the 3 of them were all pretty related. They all have to do with screencasting or screen recordings. But they're using the screencast option for 3 different purposes. Strategy 67 talks about using screen recordings to demonstrate knowledge. So in that instance, we're talking about learners who are recording their screen to demonstrate their thinking. Then the educator would review those recordings to figure out where the learning occurred, maybe where a breakdown occurred. Again, that mistake tolerance. If we're recording a video, ensuring or letting our students know that mistakes are okay here, because that's really what we need to see as educators, where the mistakes occur, so that we can help either use those mistakes to help others who are making the same mistakes, or to help guide the learning process. One extension activity, you'll see on these strategies that the authors provide an extension activity. They talked about housing recordings in a space, even recording, creating a folder where it's just mistakes. So these are the recordings of students who made the same mistake in the same place on this math problem. let's look at them, let's learn from these mistakes. And by the way, we're all making them. So now we're increasing that mistake tolerance piece. We're increasing engagement because now other students are feeling better about the mistakes they're making. They know that when they're creating artifacts, it doesn't have to be the perfect final product. If that's the environment that we have created for them. You'll see a few different why statements there, and I won't read through those, but one that I liked had to do with math, where we talk about the practicing of calculation. So, we know that practicing something over and over again is going to make us better. But if we can demonstrate that we know that already, are those other instances of practicing really necessary? Maybe not. So if our students can record that process and we can verify that learning has occurred and they're ready to move on, then that's an option for that.
And one thing I'll say too, since the math came up and I get all excited, is that, like, generally speaking, that gets flipped around. So those of you who teach math, you probably recognize that students are more willing to do the stuff they know how to do and less willing to do the stuff they don't know how to do. Mm-hmm. And it's exactly backwards to the way it ought to be. So it can be a little bit of trick of messaging sometimes, but if you can build that appreciation of the value of mistake into your classroom environment, then you get the students more likely digging into the stuff they don't know how to do. And then you can tell them they don't need to do any more practice on the stuff they do. Like, we don't need to spend hours and hours doing stuff we know how to do, folks. If we're going to spend hours doing math, let's do the stuff that's producing some new learning. That can be tricky, but it's exactly the way that it happens in classrooms where lots of learning goes on.
Looking at the Google Docs here, Christy, on your theme, the slide that we have right now, somebody put down Coach's Eye, and that's a great. I love Coach's Eye, and when it first came out, it was like it took me a year or two to kind of feel like, oh man, am I being the biggest jock suggesting Coach's Eye? And Coach's Eye is from TechSmith, who makes Camtasia and Snagit. And Coach's Eye is just a great way to video material or artifacts and being able to have draw lines and circles and things to add to it. But the coolest thing with it is that it also has a measurement tool where you can measure things on your video with the angles and distances, and it would be really cool in the math class, I would think, for it. But thanks for adding that onto our Google Docs. I forgot all about that.
Nice. And from that local company, TechSmith. That's great.
And they're local. Yeah.
And when we flip it, when we talk about us as educators using screen recordings, we know that our spoken directions and our instructions, they're there and then they're gone because we're moving on, to the next thing. Andrew, would you mind just going back real quick to the previous slide? There we go. So if we have recordings, as we all learned last year, recording our lessons, I know we all saw benefit to that, listen, now we've got a video of me annotating a page, me explaining this concept in more detail, providing examples. It maybe doesn't replace reteaching, but it's there. I know me as a parent, I relied on those when supporting my own children in their learning. Like, well, let's watch, Miss video because we're going to learn how to do it together. That was huge. Tools from your workbench. Of course, we've got the webcam. I know you guys, for the most part, all have a webcam on your device that you were given as an educator. However, just because you've got one doesn't mean you can't utilize a second within your classroom somewhere. Phil's holding up his webcam there. Also the graphics tablet. It's so cool. It's just plug and go. It's a USB port graphics tablet. and will allow you to annotate on the fly anything on your screen. It kind of just serves as a mouse. Your students can use that to demonstrate their knowledge. You could set that up in a section in your classroom where screen recording is being used. So lots of options there. And then there are some links. The iOS screen recording link just shows you how on any Apple device, iPhone, iPad, that you can enable screen recording. WeVideo is another. And then of course we all have our preferred screencast site. I like to use Loom. That's just the one that I got familiar with early on in the pandemic and still like to use that one. And then you've got 3 links down there for different resources that were provided within our Inclusive Learning 365 book. Camtasia, yeah, that's a good one too, from our TechSmith folks. We're going to cover 2 more strategies and then we'll take a break. This one is strategy 131, converting analog text to read alouds on the fly. So we all have text that is presented in our classroom. For the most part, our students are able to access and interact with that text with no problem. However, some can't. And so allowing a station or a place in our classrooms where we provide our students with the ability to convert analog text into digital text is going to be an important skill for many of our students. We know that a lot of times our students' ability to comprehend text that they hear is much higher than their ability to comprehend text that they are reading due to various reasons, but providing that audio support to go along with their text will be really valuable for our students. And rather than just doing it for those kids who require it based on their IEP accommodations, just creating that space and those tools in your classroom for anybody to do that might go a long way. So from your workbench, you might choose to use the gooseneck tablet holder to set up just a space where students can scan a worksheet and convert that analog text to digital. Microsoft Lens is an iPad app that can be used to do the same. Google Keep has that option. The newer iPads 8 and newer, as long as they can be updated to iOS 15 or newer, they all have a live text option where if you are holding up your phone or your iPad over a worksheet, it's going to recognize where the words are and convert those to be able to be read aloud or interacted with. And then there's a link there for the Read and Write for Google Chrome extension. And I specifically put the link on there that is the free version for teachers. So as educators, we get the full premium version for free. And I wanted to share that link with you guys. And again, a couple of resources for you to click on when you are able to.
And with the audio in mind also, like I don't know how many of you have taken classes since you've started your teaching career, but like some of the project and some of the more creative things that are a little bit longer and slower and not so straightforward to do can be a little tricky to communicate in a packet or in a checklist or the directions and those kinds of things. You're probably recognized as a teacher when you ask students to do that stuff, you're going to have to present the directions in some form or fashion anyway. So if you just created an audio recording to go through the directions too, knowing that your students are probably going to hear it differently or at a higher level than they read it, just having that available so that if you need to review the instructions, here's the recording. You have the packet. I'm going to go over it. You can ask questions, and then here's the recording also. And that can just sit on Google Classroom for the students who need it.
Which leads us very nicely to this last strategy about pairing audio and video to facilitate expression. So when we are creating, I'm just looking at Emily's chat here about audio quality. Somebody can help her out. When we create content or material in only one medium, it limits the number of people who can access that material effectively. So the authors of the book talk about providing materials in multiple modalities to ensure that our learners can either choose which modality they prefer, or just access multiple modalities if that's the way that they can absorb that content in a more effective way. So again, we've got a few options, several from our workbench that could allow us to add just that extra layer or that extra modality type onto our content that we're delivering. Headliner app was one that I've not used before, but they go in depth with this tool in the book, and down on resources, you can see that there's a how-to video for using Headliner app. But what it does is you have a video that you've set up, which really could just be an image of a document, and then you record audio to embed over it. So it's just a platform where you can add other layers, other modality layers to your content that you're providing. We try as often as we can to add captions, which I'm realizing right now that we don't have that enabled for this training. Well, we try in any instance that we can to add closed captioning to the content that we're delivering, whether it's a video we've created, a live session like this, kind of an old-fashioned way that many of us learned over the pandemic was to use Google Slides and just go into present mode and layer that Google slide behind our content as it captures a live caption of what we are saying. But since that time, Zoom has added it for free. Otter.ai is another site that creates live transcripts of our audio and saves that transcript for future uses. Some teachers have also tried just turning on some sort of dictation tool, which can be a little bit more difficult. It doesn't pick up the punctuation like Otter AI can do, so it's not always the best option. Under resources, we included a video from Allison's Tech Tip Tuesday, where she talks about how there is just a built-in setting within Google Drive that can recognize characters. It can take a flat photo of a worksheet or something with text on it, and it can recognize where the words are. And so now you're able to add that audio piece or have that text to speech or the text read aloud because you've now recognized the text from that worksheet. So she kind of talks you through how to do that. And then the second resource listed there is the in-depth video. Well, I shouldn't say in-depth because I think it's only about 3 or 4 minutes long on how to use that Headliner program.
So I'm going to move right into our next theme, which is alternatives, writing and document management. And just as a reminder, as I'm going through these themes as well as Phil, make sure that if you think of any tools that aren't listed on our slides, be sure to go to that Google Doc for the tools for strategies vetted by you, and add in any suggestions that you think might fit the strategies we're talking about. So alternatives to writing and document management, many of you were interested in, your students being able to have access to everything with great ease, as well as the obvious one, differentiating instruction in writing. So like the themes, the strategies that I pulled out for these themes kind of meet those needs a bit. So the first one is strategy 200. Can I move to the next? Collecting highlighted text. So a couple of my strategies, I think they're really powerful, but they're also more traditional or not necessarily anything completely new. but I think how we use the strategy can be really inventive. So collecting highlighted text can be utilized, obviously paper, pencil, right? You can use your highlighter in your box of stuff that we sent you, or you can even use the Post-it notes, or you can use a variety of electronic tools for highlighting. So basically using the highlighting tool or the actual highlighters to differentiate between key parts of speech and writing and content and vocabulary. That's kind of where the strategy was focusing on by color coordinating. But you can also expand on this and use this as an opportunity to collaborate as well. So some of the tools that I've listed here under the non-workbench tools on the far right-hand side, probably things that you've heard of or seen before, but maybe haven't thought to use it in this way. So the Read and Write Chrome extension has a great highlighting tool that you can differentiate with different colors. The highlighting tool in Google Docs also allows you to customize your highlights by sequence and color. And then we thought we'd throw in something non-Google related, OneNote, using the digital notebook to highlight those tools and automatically save those highlights. But so what I want to point out in this article that I linked, because this strategy is pretty straightforward, right? Using different colors to highlight key aspects of text to enhance learning. So I think that it's an obvious strategy, but how we use that strategy, I think, is sometimes not necessarily overlooked, but assumed that a student, maybe knows how to use the strategy effectively. So this article I pulled out from Edutopia, it kind of just talks about how, highlighting is great. Everybody kind of knows how to do it, but is it actually impacting student learning? And so, just highlighting, keywords and phrases, that's kind of step one, but taking it a step further and annotating your highlights and then taking it a step further again and creating an activity or a lesson out of your annotations to help students synthesize that information, reflect, create visuals that help them actually retain what they're highlighting instead of just meaningless highlight. I remember, when I was a student back in the day, there were times where I would look at my page and it's 90% highlights, and it's that can't be right. That can't be everything that's important here. And I wasn't retaining things. So I think taking that concept of meaningless highlights and transferring it to, all right, let's do the highlighting and take it a step further with our activity is where the power comes in. And additionally, they also talk about the collaboration piece being really helpful as well, that students annotating the same text and then sharing your annotations with each other, such as using a Google Doc for this, right? Everybody's on the same thing, really able to see oh, you highlighted that, or you annotated in this way, can really spark up some quality conversations and good questions. So a bit of an obvious one, but I think taking it a step further makes it a little more useful.
I think, though, one of the things you said that maybe wasn't obvious that I thought was really good that you hammered on, though, was the how piece. That and that's the same with memes. That's something that I didn't mention with memes. Same idea. These it might seem fairly simple. Okay, you take a picture and put some words on it. You take the highlighter and you highlight some text. But there's a difference between doing that stuff powerfully and doing it as a beginner, as with all skills. And so, taking the time to teach the learners how to engage that strategy is how it becomes so powerful. So that made me think when I was talking about my memes, how I should have mentioned that. You reminded me of that. Good job.
Thanks. And again, I think a couple of my strategies, there's a lot of different tools that you could use. So please do add whatever it is that you currently use or ideas you might have on that Google Doc, that collaborative Google Doc. Next up is strategy 90, creating online portfolios. And I pulled this one out because I am really, personally, I advocate for online portfolios, not just from the tech side of things, right? I mean, I guess you could do a paper pencil portfolio, but there's so many ways you could do it and so many tools you can use. And to me, that the concept of like putting the onus on students to pick and choose not just what they put in, but how they demonstrate that, like how they create their portfolio, what tool they use to even create it. I think it really gives them kind of that confidence to showcase what they've learned and demonstrate their mastery in a variety of ways, right? It's not just test A and you show me what you know. It can be different formats, videos, drawings, photos, voice recordings, all kinds of stuff. And so, perhaps a student that traditionally doesn't perform all that well on, traditional type tests can showcase their mastery in a way that better suits them. So they can really customize that. Additionally, I think it also allows for students to be very self-reflective, to say, how did I perform on this task? Or what quality of work is this project or this artifact that I have? To then say, is it worth putting in my portfolio? Like, is this really my best work? Do I really show mastery here, or can I improve on this? And so, again, taking that ownership of their own learning, I think all of those things really come out when you effectively utilize online portfolios. So I also added, there's so many different ways you can use the tools in our Workbench to create artifacts to then put them in, whatever format they want, whether, Seesaw is obviously a big one, Google Drive, they could create a Google site. Those are the big ones I thought of, but the article that I linked here from EdSurge, they just also kind of just encompass some things I just mentioned. So like the key points, give students voice and choice. That's an obvious one. Everybody likes choice. It puts all their learning in one place. So talking about, organizing and having that access and that document management, that kind of is built into that as well. Supporting project-based learning, promoting individual check-ins, so that like self-reflective piece, and then the obvious one, the alternate forms of assessment. So I think there's a multitude of different tools that you could list as well for online portfolios. So I look forward to seeing what you throw in there.
And secondary people, don't overlook Seesaw. Okay, Seesaw often gets talked about as though it's a kindergarten, first grade, early elementary tool, which it is. Don't get me wrong, but like one of the most powerful uses of Seesaw I ever saw was in an AP English classroom, because of its ability to gather feedback, and that long form portfolio is almost like a running record of student writing pieces that showed changes in their thought, changes in their skill, changes in their writing pieces over time. It's really well suited for that.
All right, my next strategy is, I think, another one of those obvious ones. I always get the obvious ones, to me anyway. Pre-writing with sticky notes. I personally, anyone who knows me well, especially in my personal life, knows that I love sticky notes. Like, my name is Allison and I have a sticky note problem. Like on my desk right now, I not only have sticky notes, but I have like different sizes of sticky notes. So if anyone was going to talk about pre-writing with sticky notes, it was going to be me. Anyway, the idea of being able to use this in a variety of different formats, whether it's paper, pencil, or electronically, is kind of great too, because sticky notes have kind of, the official Post-its, they still exist, but you can do all kinds of stuff now with things like Jamboard and Google Keep. There's like electronic sticky notes. So if you want to be more environmentally friendly, you can use them that way as well. So learners can use color-coded sticky notes for organizing their writing. That's really what the strategy in the book talked about. Topic sentences, supporting details, thesis statements, closing arguments, all that kind of stuff. So that, I think in its traditional sense, whether you have your actual sticky notes and you're, organizing your writing that way, or you're in, Jamboard, creating sort of more of a brainstorm. All of those are great tools for that particular activity. But I think you can also use brainstorming or sticky notes for brainstorming beyond just the writing process, right? How are you going to attack specific projects? Maybe in a collaborative sense too, group projects, or just other tasks that require writing that kind of need that brain map, that visual. And so I also have linked here, if you're not familiar with Ditch That Textbook, Matt Miller, he is like the king of templates. He's got fantastic templates, tons of Jamboard templates specifically. Like if you ever are in the mood to like not reinvent the wheel, visit his templates. But he listed in this particular link that I added some tools or ways that you could use sticky notes or, those sticky note type tools for beyond just the writing process, right? And so he lists lesson planning, unit planning, curriculum planning. For us as educators, organizing events, club sports, obvious things, but also, pre-writing, planning out student projects, writing speeches. I think that would be a powerful tool, because even though the speech itself is going to be delivered verbally, so to construct it using writing, so that might be a nice way to make sort of public speaking and approaching a speech a little less daunting for students. And then even like debriefing after science lab or experiment. So I thought there was some creative ideas beyond just utilizing it for traditional pre-writing for an essay, let's say. I also like the other tools that I listed. I included Padlet and Padlet. They're not necessarily sticky note type tools, but they are brainstorming tools. And I think you can utilize both of those concepts for pre-writing or organizing your thoughts overall. There's probably loads more tools, so link them in the collaborative Google Doc. All right, I'm going to move on to my last strategy, producing text with speech. So this one, the basic purpose, the best purpose of this tool is it allows learners to have their speech transcribed digitally without interrupting the flow of writing with spelling or keyboard access issues, right? So it's that it meets that immediate need of, it makes it easier, right? It also allows for instant accommodations for students that require that. But I think sometimes we assume that, just specific students should be using text-to-speech. Text-to-speech it's built into like all of our devices now, right? It's very much mainstream. So I think, deliberately teaching like when you could use it and maybe when it's not an appropriate time to use it. Like obviously if you're taking notes when someone's like, you're in a presentation and you're obviously not going to take your notes by, talking out loud, interrupting their speech, but differentiating some of that. And I think allowing it to, or research a little bit like what's available in some of your tools that you might not even know about. Even just you look at your smartphone, like everything has those accessibility options now, and text-to-speech is 100% there. I have a funny story. My mom, she lives and breathes by her text-to-speech with texting. And when I first showed her the feature, she was a little hesitant and then started using it. And now she like refuses to text normally, or, with her fingers. I have gotten not one, but multiple voicemails from my mom. And she forgets that she's on the phone and she thinks she's text talking to me via text. So I'll get a voicemail. It's like, hey, Allison, period. Please call me when you, and then she's like, oh my God. This is a voicemail. I have them saved because they're that amazing. But anyway, my point in telling you that is anybody with any type of device, for the most part nowadays, it's built right in. And it's also built right into a lot of Google features, such as Google Docs, right? The voice typing feature. I think that's like the main one that everybody, well, I hope everybody uses. And I find that one is really accurate too. Not all of them are that accurate. There's built-in dictation tools in your Chromebooks. Read and Write has that Chrome extension, has the text-to-speech Mote. You can, create those verbal comments and annotations and kind of have that exchange back and forth. So overall, I want to end this strategy with a reference to the article that I threw in by Shake Up Learning. And he says, don't limit your use of voice typing to just text-heavy essays or like the obvious things, right? You can dictate anything into docs, including class notes, meeting notes, to-do lists, starter sentences, thesis statements, vocabulary, spelling lists, math word problems. She goes on and on. So to add to that, use the voice typing for a variety of purposes, but also encourage your students, whether they need it or not, to utilize it, because it makes life a little bit easier and faster. And that is the wrap up of my strategies. Any questions about alternatives to writing and doc management, or anything to add?
I'd like to add something to Allison. It was interesting with the text or the speech to text is so interesting to me because it's come so commonplace for people. But the last suggestion that you had, last resource, talks about doing that, just not just blurting it out, going down with four different steps. So think about what you want to say it, and then read what you say, and then edit it. And actually those are the four basic steps if you're using a paper pencil. So it's not like the kids are getting away with something by using that. They're still going through that process.
I was going to say just real quick on what Phil was talking about, that last link for the speech recognition how-to. You can use your lamination pockets. I know we are, kind of wondering what those are for, but you can print up that simple little 4-step process for speech recognition for writing and stick it in between those two laminating pages. You can buy like $19 little lamination machines where you can feed those through to actually laminate them. I've also seen teachers just use other heating sources like irons or hair dryers. It doesn't get quite as hot, but if you aren't able to purchase those less expensive classroom laminators.
When it comes to some of these too, like some of these, and Phil's going to get into this, is a great segue with the idea of like the hair dryers and the curling irons and things like that. Like there can be kind of a hack the solution kind of mind frame that like I see an opportunity. And that's why, like, if you look in your bag and you notice like the little blue and white, the REMC tools that like kind of have a hinge and they open like this, those are cell phone holders. Yeah, that one. Those are cell phone holders, but they're just little structures that give you the ability to like change a level or to get a camera kind of in a different angle or in a different spot, that kind of thing, that provides an opportunity for you to just have a new opportunity. Like it doesn't, because if you've ever done the thing where it's like, oh, this would be great if I could record myself giving this lecture or this talk or whatever, and I just need to perch my phone on a stack of 4 textbooks and put a little roll of masking tape right here and all this stuff. Like, like you just MacGyver your way through to some sort of a solution because you know what you need. You just don't have a tool to do it, and so the more just little structures that you can have in your workbench gives you the ability to more likely be able to build the thing I used to have a Chromebook that wouldn't mirror to my projector, but I had a dock cam. So when I needed to mirror it, I would put my dock cam up to my projector, and then I would tip my Chromebook like this so that the screen was flat on the ground. And I used to perch a stapler underneath it so that it wouldn't flip back up, and then I could mirror my screen that way. And it wasn't great, but it worked. So anyway.
Okay, I guess I'm up to bat here. So my section on this is DIY and classroom space design. I would see this, looking at this, I'm like, wow, this probably should have been the first thing we looked at. If I had a positive vote and where I go on this session, but it's interesting to me because people are still looking at how anything that you could make yourself or any type of classroom design and how that can incorporate into the alternative lessons design and what we're trying to do with the kids, and trying to match that all up is something that is really important in what we do. But so Andrew, can you flip to the next slide? So, Andrew was pretty excited that we could have this session on Pi Day. So if you've ever seen me face to face, this is the visual that I had for Pi Day. Now, Andrew, the math teacher, had a little bit different idea on that, but this is a picture of the dessert table at Thanksgiving at my mom's house. So this was a pretty eventful day for us, and I'm one of 5 boys. And my parents still live in the area. Many of my brothers do now. So,
hey, what's this red one?
Oh, you were going to ask me that.
I'm engaged. You engaged me.
I know it. I can't
actively
remember.
In fact, I see pecan.
Yeah,
that looks like apple. Those look like maybe blueberry or some sort of berry pies. Yeah. That's pumpkin.
Yeah.
This looks like a cheesecake, but it's probably not.
No, it is. My daughter made that one. It was the chocolate mousse cake.
Yes. And then this red one here.
That one may have been the cheesecake.
Okay.
With the cherry topping on it.
Is cheesecake pie? Add your thoughts to the chat, everybody.
Okay, so I wanted to also kind of say on that slide too, is that like my mom, she had 5 boys, and she's turning 80 this year, and she's always been very nice, and her husband was an educator and retired educator, and trying to nicely say it, but with 5 boys, she said, elementary schools are never really made for boys. And she's, getting up there in age, but she's making a point on things, and it's not just boys, but we kind of, she has a vision, or seen a vision of 6 desks in the line and 6 in a column, and with 35 kids in the classroom kind of scenario. Okay, I will ask my wife and get it and figure that out for you in a second here. I can't remember. I should have known that, so I'm embarrassed that I don't know that. Let me, so doing this section really helps me out with being able to explain to my mom how things have changed, and how we've been able to, help the little boys out in elementary schools kind of things. So you flip to the next page. This is also somebody, I don't know if people there's a conference in Grand Rapids next week, called McCall. It's teachers computer learning technology and with computers and such. It's huge. 3,000 people show up. Andrew gets awards there and stuff. But the last time I was there, the last in-person conference 2 years ago, I went and I saw this person here, Teresa Wilcom, and she is an OT or occupational therapist. And she had an all-day pre-con at McCall, and she has all the DIA materials and things that she's used before and created. She's using, I mean, uses PVC and cuts it up and makes it into different things with Velcro, and she uses yard signs and cuts them into pieces and makes them into stands for iPads and tablets, and she's using tape and hair dryers and boiling water to mix things up into materials. And it's just a great resource for you if you are like, I don't have the money to do these kind of things that that we're showing right now, or some of the suggestions we have on here. So, like, you know, one of the things I see on our document for suggestions is Dragon Dictation. That's a $500 program. You know, how many people or how many pieces of software you're going to have in your classroom that's a $500 piece of equipment. So I just wanted to be able to show you that and understand that if you're interested, reach out to me. I have a couple of her books. If you're interested in making something in your classroom on your own kind of thing, this is the lady to go to for that. So I also I put some pictures in here, and I know they're small and I put 4 on a page kind of thing, but I was hoping that you could take a look at this on your screen on your own computer with your own slide deck to blow these up. But I had a tour, and I was working, I had a tour at Chippewa Middle School in Okemos. And before COVID, and I think it was probably around 2015 or so, is that they had a bond issue for improvements on their buildings. And the teachers got together ahead of time and asked the administration if they could create a committee on just ways that they could equip their classroom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, because to have the forethought to come up with ideas there. Because I was at Holt High School as a resource room teacher when the new high school was built. And so I was a part of all that planning going on. And the only planning I had access to for my classroom was, do you want desks or do you want tables? And these people had thought this through so much that they had such creative ideas, and each classroom was different in what they did. So and part of it over at Chippewa too is they have classrooms from over at Okemos Central, the old building, and at Chippewa, the Montessori classrooms there, and Kennewa. So they have a different way of thinking about how classrooms should be looking and how kids should perform in the classrooms. And you can kind of see these kind of things, the examples that we have that I'm showing you. So like the first one up in what quadrant is that, Andrew, math teacher? Up with there's examples of stationary bikes, but they have desks on top of them are flat plastic boards.
The stationary bikes are in quadrant 2.
2, okay. All right, so quadrant 2, the stationary bike. So kids just pop on those bikes and just start just moving and being able to talk and get their stuff done on that. Then on quadrant number 1, the beanbag chair is, that's just a huge beanbag chair, and in a certain area, kind of behind where the teacher desk may be, could be an area where people are just chilling out with trying to compose themselves on that. Now, just a caveat too with beanbag chairs, you make sure that your fire marshal allows those beanbag chairs. If you're in certain districts, i.e. East Lansing, the fire marshal goes through once a year and kicks out all the beanbag chairs out of there for it. So then if I go down to quadrant 3, and that's just on the, those are just circle plywood with a half of a cut ball. So the kids use those and just stand on. So if you've ever, been in a training room at a high school or involved in any sports, I see those as what trainers use to strengthen ankles. But teachers were using that just to get some of that energy out of kids, and if they're standing, they can just stand on that and move it around. And then in quadrant number 4, this is a high desk, a standing desk for kids, and they're just placed around the classroom for kids to be able to use. But one thing I thought was really cool too on this was that if on the bottom of that screen, there's actually a place you can rest your foot and move your foot constantly. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so me. I'm just tapping, I'm moving my foot constantly. And that would be an awesome desk for me to be able to get my work done and not have to be trying to move around or trying to find a way to get movement in my body to get my work done and refocus. Okay, let's take a look at the next page, Amy.
Well, and one of the things too that maybe you guys recognized if you had to work from home, like if you found that you got sent home and had to teach from there with COVID, the extreme lengths that you maybe felt like you wanted to go to get your working environment just right, like to elevate your screen so they were in the right spot. Like I've got a cooking pot holding up a monitor right now still with kind of this MacGyver style. That's the second MacGyver reference of the day. Mention of kind of how I've got this whole built. I got 3 books stacked under my laptop here. I've got like a exercise mat underneath my feet because I prefer that to the carpet. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's a thing we know how to do. Our students are going to be the same way. They're not all, but we ask them all to sit down in a chair at a desk and like act like that's going to be cool for all of them. Well, would it be cool for all of us?
Yeah, exactly. So these are some of the pictures I took in Chippewa, and there's one here in quadrant 2 that's in Kennewaw. But what I wanted you to kind of take a look at too is that, yes, they got a bond issue, and yes, we're talking about Okemos, but it was also, these are things that people created on their own too. A lot of things that you need to take a look at too is how portable things are. In the table sizes and heights, they're different, and they fit different number of kids, and you can put those things together, and back to that Montessori kind of feel in that whole building is, it was okay just zipping a chair up next to somebody or a couple other kids to work on things. The other thing in quadrant 2 that's a special ed classroom in Kennewaw, Justin's classroom over there, if anyone knows Justin. But he has pads on the ground, you know, so, and there's a lot of other classrooms in the building had just throw pillows that kids sat on, you know, and it helps too with you establishing ground rules. No, you're going to sit here, but you're going to be comfortable doing this. Reach over to the table and fill out what you need to do. And the one below Justin's classroom, and is that, what's that, quadrant 3 or 4? 3 or 4?
That's
So-
quadrant 3, negative.
Oh, okay, all right, thanks. So quadrant 3 here, Matt, the teacher made this little stage thing in the back. So I was in the classroom with all the kids in there, and they're all kind of, he's explaining something, what they're going, what the next thing's going to happen, and there's kids standing, sitting, on the ground, on the step, you know, they're just over there, but they're all paying attention. They're all engaged in what he's doing on things. There's other kids taking notes on the tables, but their butts are on the ground, kind of thing. So it was just, there's other kids using the desk, you know, kind of thing. So, you know, I think that having that flexibility within the classroom to match up with the strategies and that that you have for each and every one of your lessons and your units is something I'm sure you guys have thought about. But I just wanted to throw some other ideas that you may be able to have and think about what other people have done.
All right. So as with the other sessions or the other sections, go ahead and add your thoughts and the way that you're providing that classroom space flexibility into your classroom and some of that alternate design as well. And then we're getting a little tight on time.
Oh, we really? Okay. Oh, all right. I'm sorry. Okay,
It's
so
okay.
I have 3
Christy,
strategies.
it's Christy's fault, really.
I got into this relaxed thing of like, oh my gosh, we got plenty of time, but I wanted to, I have 3 strategies here. Excuse me. The first one is just scanning text to make it accessible. This goes along with what Christy and Allison have given examples of. And it also goes along with the questioning people wanted to see from our survey on, hey, we may still have some kids at home. You know, this is an example that we can do to make things accessible for them, and just scanning the text. Now, strategy 41 has a box, and it scans. You can put a cell phone on top of the box and scan it through. They no longer make the box. It's out of commission. I'm sure the next edition of the book won't have it in there, but you still can use this strategy. Is you can use the gooseneck arm and take a snapshot of the document that you're talking about, and then you can have it accessible. Now, accessible means that it would be able to have a person read the text using, in this case, a reader. So we had examples of readers like the read and write and there's different software to be able to read the text, but the text needs to be identified as text on the document. So that's what we call OCR, and I think Christy went over that already. So how that's done, how you can do that real quickly, is being able to take a snapshot with your smartphone of the document, save it in Google Docs, and then move that document from the Google Drive, save it in Google Drive, move it to your Google Docs. When you bring it up into Google Docs, it is automatically OCR'd through Google. And then you can read it with a reader, or enlarge it or change it now, where you couldn't have done that before, but just taking a screenshot. So the resource on there is a YouTube video on how to do that. So from Teachers Tech. The next slide is creating audio libraries. And so you may have a library of books in your classroom, but they may not be accessible to all the kids in the class. So this is an example of using a QR code, and they talk about creating a QR code for each page and using audio, and you can use the digital recorder to take it and then save it in your Google Drive, and then share it to a QR code generator, and then bring it back to that page. Or you could do it in chapters, or you could do the whole book, no matter how big the book is. So that's my two strategies for three strategies. Oh, I had a keyboard strategy. I'm sorry. And take a look at my keyboard strategy.
It's okay. I think we want to.
Later.
I want to make sure we get to the understanding of the homework, so that we can make sure everybody gets
go ahead. That's fine.
And Andrew promised we wouldn't be here a second past 6 o'clock.
I did. They're going to start throwing pie at me if you don't.
On slide 66, you will see a Google Slides icon with a link to a slide deck, and we called this the Inclusive Education 517 EdTech Community Shares slide deck. So Andrew's going to open that, and you will see an initial slide there. And this is kind of what is going to guide our next, we have about 6 weeks before our next session time that we meet. So this is kind of where we would love to hear from you all. And we kind of framed this in a way, a similar way to how we framed choosing those 4 themes. We initially thought of or brainstormed on that barrier. What is the barrier that you're currently facing in your classroom that you intend to address with the strategies from the book, with tools from the Workbench bag, with non-Workbench tools, and this is unique to you and your learning environment. So start there. Start with thinking of the barrier, and that will become your entry point for identifying a strategy that will hopefully eliminate that barrier. So you're next going to choose a strategy within the book that you hope will address that barrier, and you're going to implement that strategy within your learning environment. You get to choose how that looks, what tools you use, what sites you use, what artifacts you allow your students to create, or what you create. And you will see that each of you have been given a slide, and it's a blank slide. And we did that intentionally because we know that the slide doesn't necessarily have to be the cool thing in this activity. You may choose to just add a link on that slide that represents the artifact that you created for the strategy that eliminated the barrier. You may choose to jazz up your slide with pictures of how that looked in your classroom, with videos, with audio recordings. You may just choose to add text on your slide. Really, this is up to you. And we wanted to model kind of that UDL approach to having flexibility with how you guys all respond to this activity. Jump in here, guys, if there anything on that needs clarity or clarification.
No, I think that was pretty good. Think of the barrier or the problem you're trying to solve, the barrier you're trying to address. Choose a strategy that you think will pair well with it. Try it and capture an artifact that represents that try, and then reflect about how well it worked. It's not always going to work. And you know this from your classrooms like we do. Learning can sometimes happen just as well from a fail as it can from a success. Both of those are valuable. So try it and share it out. And we're going to learn from each other. Session 3 is going to be a lot about reflecting on this slide deck as far as it goes from you learning from each other and from us learning from you.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to mention is, you know, you can go as in depth as you want. You can even pick multiple strategies. I know when I first looked at the book, I'm like, how do I like limit myself to just a handful? So feel free to, you know, the sky's the limit, but also know that, you know, you're busy and you have, you know, only so much time. So really kind of have that balance of we want you to share in whatever way it makes sense to you. And we really want everyone to participate, because session 3 will not be as successful if that's not the case.
Yeah.
But we also want to keep it open-ended to suit your needs, just making sure that you're addressing those specific questions you've asked in the slides. And I think I'm up for reminders. So make sure if you didn't already, you sign in using that form linked in the chat. Make sure if you have any questions or if you have ideas or just experiences throughout the next 6 weeks, make sure you're posting in this Google group. That's the whole point, is it's a collaborative space. So don't wait for us to ask a question or post something. Like, feel free, you know, to share whatever it is that you want. Make sure if you're missing any items in your box, let us know before you leave or shoot us an email. As well as if for some reason you're not getting emails from the Google group, let's troubleshoot that. So reach out to us and we'll support you in that. And then obviously make sure you add your portion to the inclusive education slides that Christy just talked about.